Ancient Albatross here again, and the boys are back in town. We got the full Cypher Unlimited crew back together finally. So we have Spigs18 or Anthony, we have AD or Alpha Dean, and Dean, what are we doing here today?
Hey, we're back. We are here to talk about New Game Master Month, and we're going to here to talk about the third and fourth installments. Third installment was let's have a look at the adventure, which was last week Thursday, and then this week Tuesday was all about encounters. So we're going to jump right in, and you know, got our brother back in the corner over there, the illustrious Anthony Spigs18. Tell us
I'm
what's
happy.
going on, Ant.
I'm happy to be back, guys. I missed you guys.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It was so sad. Since what Dean said, we're gonna talk about adventures for. This was the Tuesday article, correct?
Thursday last week.
Oh, this was a Thursday article. Yeah. So, what exactly is an adventure, guys?
I mean, the article breaks it down pretty well, but not to steal their word for word. An adventure is basically a story that you're telling with your, whoever's at the table. There's a series of challenges. Usually, there's an overarching theme or storyline that's being followed, whether you have it planned or not. And an adventure is taking them from the beginning of that story to the end of it.
So
that's a pretty well-defined definition.
But again, there's a lot of stuff that goes into an adventure, though, and where the article breaks it down pretty well in a set of bullet points. And yeah.
Also, I think it's worth noting that there's basically like three different types of adventures. There's the pre-written adventure that you would go and purchase, either at the back of a setting book or just an individual, module. Like like we were discussing off video about how AD&D era was, that was the era of the pre-written modules. Like then there's also the homemade adventure that the three of us tend to do more often. That's when you design a narrative on your own and you come up with the circumstances, the plot hooks, and the direction the game is going to take. And then there's the Cypher system way, which I think they do a great job. They sort of give you a mix of both. They give you a quick synopsis of an idea of a game, but they don't fill in the blanks for you. So you have like the idea of an adventure, but then you get to fill in the blanks.
What they do,
the instant adventures.
What I like to call it is that they give you fodder. They give you those things that could sit there as set pieces, which is a beautiful thing. Even when you look at Numenera. Numenera is a perfect example because Numenera is a grandiose idea, but it only has certain things that are fully defined, and you get to build off of that. And so that's how adventure should work. And the example I like to use for Numenera is always the steadfast. The steadfast, no matter whose game you play in, everybody knows what the steadfast is, but you don't know what's out beyond the steadfast. So it's that kind of deal.
And now that we've talked about what an adventure is, let's break down like really what what an adventure consists of, like what really makes an adventure. So, of course, like the article starts with a bullet point of an initial set of circumstances, like an isolated village in the wilderness, people looking for a treasure map. Like it could be any sort of hook that'll drive the plot of the story forward. That's really the initial set of circumstances. Could be anything, really.
Yeah, you need something to compel the players to actually want to play your game, right? Like they need a reason to continue the story moving forward. You can't, like a common mistake would be, not getting into the action very quickly, and you wind up delaying and wasting, a good 30, 40 minutes trying to figure out as a player, what are you supposed to do?
What's my motivation? You have to, what's my motivation?
And sometimes people use the word linear as a curse word when it comes to designing games. But as a new GM, there's nothing wrong with having a beginning, at least the beginning set of your adventure very linear, because it's easier on you. you may not be as comfortable with the players going off the rails. So a little bit of rails is all right. At least maybe the first hour of the adventure, so you have it like pre-planned.
And the thing I'll say about that as well is like as you are, a new GM, having those rails there, those steps kind of keeps you focused on what your outcome is. And as you become more and more comfortable, you'll you'll develop the ability to, be improvisational. And at the same time, you might not, your style might actually be the person who preps everything out and tells a story. The only thing I'd ask, or suggest is that you find it in yourself to have a little flexibility. It'll make your enjoyment just as great as your players, because players are always have a tendency to do what you don't expect them to do.
And
All right.
well, I
Go
was just
ahead,
gonna
man.
add on one other simple thing just to this little topic real fast before we move on. Just that even if you find yourself not falling on either spectrum, like whether you have a loosely defined story or like a very loosely defined story with like just having open ends, there is nothing wrong if you find enjoyment in really fully planning something out, like essentially writing your own adventure. Like you might make a flow chart of how things might spawn up from different scenes, and again, if you find enjoyment in doing that much prep work, there's nothing wrong with it.
All right. So this lead me to ask this because, all right. So if you guys are both GMs, if what advice would you give a first time GM when they planning their first session? And could you give me the advice from I'm running a pre-made adventure and I'm running an adventure I designed on my own.
Well, I can chime in for the adventure I've designed my own, but what you call it? Now I'm drawing a blank now. Um, what was the question again?
What
What
advice would you
advice
give?
would you give a new GM?
Oh yeah, yeah. I caught myself in a funny loop in my head because I thought of a funny joke about this
Yeah.
because I just said it's not a bad thing to overplan, but my advice is as a new GM you should try not to overplan. That was a mistake I made fully my first time around. I When I first started GMing, it was actually in D&D 5e, I believe, with Anthony and a bunch of our friends, and it was my first time doing it. So like all my experience at that point was watching Anthony GM. And the way he does it was so seamless. Like again, I still don't know what your notes consisted of, but
Not much.
yeah, yeah, it seemed so seamless that it seemed like you almost had everything already planned out to the T. So I tried to mimic that. I was like, oh, I got to be ready for whatever they throw at me. Like I was planning things left to right, but like when the story actually happened and we sat down to play, a lot of the stuff was just bypassed by their decisions. And I was like, okay, so this thing I spent like 2 hours planning and getting stats for creatures and stuff, like they just walked right by it. Like there was no indication, or excuse me, there was no easy way to stick it in the story that would have flowed nicely. And as a new GM, you might find yourself wanting to overplan because you think having those plans in place will make you safer, but it doesn't. It just doesn't.
Um, the best advice I can give you, and I think the advice goes for both sides. I don't think I have to give you two different aspects. The biggest thing is, first of all, remember you're just learning this craft. So don't be so hard on yourself. Um, the second thing I would say about all of this is whether it's a pre-made adventure or something that you developed yourself. Um, Players are always going to do the unexpected, even with a pre-made adventure. So what you have to do is just be flexible enough, and kind of take things in stride. And if you take it in stride and just make slight adjustments as you go along, that's why it seems so seamless most of the time, is because you know game master like Anthony or myself, we've been doing it for a while, so we just kind of know how to turn the other cheek and keep the story flowing, because it's literally, you and the people at the table are doing this thing together. you know there is no right and wrong way to do it. There's only the learning experience and becoming more comfortable in your skin. And I really think that's the biggest thing. Learn to be comfortable at your table. Make a mistake, it's okay, because guess what? You can come back to it later. You can go over it later. You know, let's keep the fun flowing.
I think for pre-written adventures, the best advice I could tell you is read the adventure. Read the adventure front to back. You don't
A
have to
couple of times.
memorize it, but get the basic overall plot of the story in your head. So in case the players do go off the initial set of whatever, pattern, whatever scene encounter, you know where to lead it back to because you know the basic arc of the story. So, a lot of times people want to run a pre-written adventure and they go, "Oh, this is a 12-hour session adventure. I'm gonna read the first 4 hours. Read the whole thing. I mean, don't be lazy. Just read the whole thing, right? And then, because then you have the basic arc of the story down. Also, is pull out from the pre-written adventures the stuff that you know is cool that you want to implement in your game. Every scene or encounter that's in a pre-written adventure is not meant for you to use every scene. It's just there to give you hooks. So pick out the ones you enjoy the most and the ones you feel that are most essential to the story that you're telling. And for homemade adventures, something that we all do a lot is give yourself an initial outline, maybe 4 or 5 bullet points, and prep what you feel is what makes you comfortable enough. If you comfortable with running an adventure that's only 5 sentences and a couple of baddie stats, then go right ahead. But if you're not comfortable doing that, there's no need. You could just prep to the amount you're comfortable. If you're comfortable writing out full descriptions because it's easier for you when you get the players in front of you to be descriptive if you wrote it down, then all the more to you. Go for it. There's no one telling you to prep too much or too little. That advice makes no sense to me. Prep what you feel comfortable prepping.
Uh,
Everyone's different.
Yeah, it's definitely something I had to learn as a new GM when I first started because just from observationally, not from talking to other GMs, it just seems like there's so much planning and prep work involved when in actuality you can do a lot of stuff behind the scenes without the players knowing. Like again, Anthony said he only had very minimal notes for a D&D game. I would have known that, not in a million years, because it seemed all so well planned and well thought out. But yeah,
But it works the other way around. I've been with GMs that come with a binder, of nothing but lore and history, and they run fantastic games. You don't have to be an improv GM. Everyone doesn't have to be an improv GM. Everyone doesn't have to be, a novelist. But you could be somewhere in the middle. It's whatever makes you comfortable.
And the other thing too, one something that I learned, what I did, um, as I evolved into the game master that I am today, I got in the habit of just creating frameworks or skeletons or outlines of whatever it is I wanted to do, and I let the players fill in the blanks. Um, with Anthony talking about having a binder, I actually have 3 ring binders somewhere over there. But from my D&D days, from the group that I played with for like 20 years, there's a binder, but a lot of that lore they created. It was a joint process because I built a framework for the story I wanted to tell, for the idea, the concept. I built, you know, certain iconic places and some iconic characters and some, cool encounters and stuff like that. But everything else came from the players. It came from what the players were doing. So, and that all got written down because it was like, hey, this world is cool, you
but
know. So that can happen too.
everything you just said is essentially what an adventure consists of. You'll have those creature details. You'll have some cool characters written down. You have some items the players might find in Cypher system. There'll be ciphers and artifacts, and all that stuff is really again what makes again the story very interesting, is having these things that'll stick out in the minds of the players later. And it's again, like Anthony said, if you want to pre-plan a super long description, like that's fine. If you want to have just a short sentence about the character and then improv from there, that's fine too. But the point being is have those points or those stats, those initial like I don't want to call them stat blocks. They're not really stat blocks, but those sets of information ready. And that's an adventure.
And I would say this as well, except for if it's your first time running, I would recommend that you might write 1 or 2 descriptions down, have the maps handy, in arm's reach, have your creature stats in arm's reach, because it's a lot easier for someone that's used to it to come up with it on the fly. But if this is your first time, you shouldn't at least risk it. At least have it close to you so you have access to it. Especially, it's nothing wrong with having a couple of descriptions in your pocket.
And what I'll say is this: it's like for me, or if I were giving advice or trying to show somebody, I'd probably say, build yourself a small little flow chart. Just to have on a 3x5 card or on the back page of your notebook or something. And that's basically what we were just talking about. We've basically talked about the whole thing of how the adventures are built. So what's the initial circumstance that's going to bring the group together? Are they friends? Are they going to meet in the tavern? Is this a cataclysm that's is it an earthquake that, and they're the last survivors, whatever it is that's bringing everybody together. What's their commonality? Then the second thing is, that commonality is whatever.
Oh, just one quick thing. That first, what brings them together has to be compelling in the narrative. Well, because it's going to make everybody wanna.
Well, that's what I was getting to, because I was going to say, whatever that circumstance is, that's the compelling factor. That's what's bringing everybody together, And like we were saying, outline the adventure. Even though you've read the entire adventure, outline it, bullet point it on that sheet of paper or on that 3x5 cards. So this encounter. You can look at what the major things are going to be, and then from there, of course, you've got your scenes and you've got your particular NPCs, and finally, you should have some notes with details on, like, if there's a big bad creature or big bad encounter, you want to have those stats and things readily available, and what'll happen is you'll start developing the nuance and the pacing to do all sorts of creative things in your story, but it just comes with time. The biggest thing, like, I can't stress it enough. Don't stress the rules. Don't stress the minutia, because it'll all come together, and especially if you got, an experienced player at the table, with you, just make that sure that person knows, okay, hey, just take some notes, so at the end we can discuss, what happened, or there's a technique called roses and thorns, where people tell you the good things about the adventure and the bad things about it, or the good things about the system and the bad things. So you can always have those discussions at the end, but have fun while you're doing it.
Most definitely. And I think now that we've broken down really what an adventure is, we can move on towards what they say do you have something else to say? Or?
Yeah, I was looking at the article now, and Charles puts a great point at the very last bullet point of the article, where he says to gear the interest of the players and their strengths to the adventure, which is absolutely fantastic. If you have 5 people and you know that they enjoy combat, steer the adventure to have more combat. But if they enjoy RP, steer the adventure where there's more RP moments. Just because the written adventure is written a certain way doesn't mean that the players will always enjoy that. So just try to gear the adventure towards your players' play styles.
Yep. I mean, and that's also talked about at the end of the article here as part of, getting ready to run this adventure. So the first advice is obviously to read the adventure, which is Taker of Sorrow on pages 363 to 375 of Discovery, I believe. Or is it
Yeah.
Destiny? Oh, okay, Discovery.
Discovery.
And then once you've read it, absorbed it, think about it. Think about the what we just discussed, the fundamentals of a good story, of a good adventure, and what Anthony just discussed, what your players might most enjoy. Hopefully, at this point, you've maybe spoken to your players, maybe you haven't. Some GMs might be looking for a group later on. Who knows? But if you do have those players, now's a good time to be talking to them as well, to see kind of where their mind is at as far as what they're expecting to get out of the game. And that harks back exactly to what Anthony said, is where you're now going to be thinking about the adventure you just read, and then now how to gear it towards the player's interests.
Yeah. So, I think that's a perfect segue into, where we're going to talk down and break down the whole idea of an encounter, which is the meat of the adventure. Encounters, a bunches of encounters, a bunch of scenes make the adventure. So, with that being said, what is an encounter? Anthony?
Oh, to me, an encounter is a circumstance in the narrative that requires the players to interact with your story. So,
Al?
I mean, yeah, that's the perfect spot on. I mean, the article even describes it like each encounter or encounters should be important moments where the players are making decisions by the second, basically, or by the minute, or whatever have you. Whereas something that happens quickly, or excuse me, that nothing important happens, is like, let's say they're resting in town, you just narrate, hey, 5 minutes of, hey, you guys went into the tavern, blah, 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 went to sleep. They're not really doing anything, so it's not really an encounter. They're just being narrated to the next encounter, essentially.
And I'll say this about an encounter. Sometimes, don't people look at the word encounter and you're thinking that you may have to interact with another character, and a non-player character or something like that. But Anthony said it the best. It is your interaction with the story. So, it could be an example. An example I like to use is, go back to when you were a kid and you were in your imagination. The floor was lava, and you were jumping across the couches. Because those were rock outcroppings for you to be safe on. That's an encounter. You're interacting with the environment. No different in a role playing game, because, we could have a scene. Let's say we were playing a Wild West, situation, and you're in the middle of town, and, the bad guys are coming, the bandit crew is coming, and you got the option, do I kick in the door here and, hide behind a bale of hay, or do I try to make it to the barn down the road, a little ways down the road, because it's going to give me a better vantage point. Those are those things. That's interacting. That's the encounter.
And an adventure is a series of encounters. And to use your example, you just gave me 3 options, right, that could lead into another encounter.
Exactly.
So you go from, as a GM, you're taking your players from one encounter to the next, trying to build a cohesive story, a cohesive narrative.
And again, the excuse me, one of my biggest mistakes as starting as a new GM was hearing the word encounters. You often think it has to be like battle oriented. Like, you always think that, hey, we're playing a role playing game, there has to be a lot of like combat, like that was a mindset I had coming from D&D 5e. Like, I know that's not really the intent of, the system or whatever have you. We're not here to debate that, but that was the mindset I garnered from playing it. And due to that, when I started GMing, I thought, hey, I'm going to have to craft a lot of battle encounters because that's what's the fun part, battling. Those are encounters. It's the battles. But it's exactly what Dean said. My mindset was way off there. It could be jumping over lava. It could be trying to, zip line, or swing off a vine across a ravine. Like, it could be anything that has a chance of failure that could put your players or whatever at risk, or it's something that affects the story in some way.
I will even take it one step further. It's the more memorable encounters are the ones that have nothing to do with action or adventure. A lot of times it's the negotiating with the shady merchant. It's the it's the seducing the barmaid to give you information about what time the person's house. The person's store closes, so you could sneak in after hours.
Well, that's and
Those
that
those those are the memorable moments.
yeah. I mean, but you can't take away from the fact that sometimes though there's the memorable swinging my
Mm.
sword, roll a natural 20, and
Oh yeah, they're all
Oh yeah,
memorable.
yeah. I mean, combat is still fun. Don't get me wrong. I'm not
like
bashing on combat if
no,
you
no,
enjoy
no. But what
that.
I was gonna say is because you made a valid point, Al. You know, know your table. By knowing your table and the people you play with, you got some people who dig combat, and they like simulationist type games and stuff like that. But then you got the other people who like RP. They like the interaction. They like the conversation. They want to make a lot. A RPG telenovela. You know,
I,
and
I mean,
then wait a minute.
uh,
The
yeah.
last point was then you have some people who might like puzzles. They might like to have to, figure out how, they want to play Indiana Jones. They got to figure out how to get past this, that, and the third. So you can have traps. And the list goes on and on. It just becomes ever more expansive. And you might have a mixture of people at your table as well.
I,
So,
I would think that the majority of people, especially people that haven't played, they don't know what they like, or they like a mix of everything. So as
mhm.
a first time GM, you should at least try to touch all those bases once in your adventure. So have some combat, have some RP, maybe have some sort of puzzle, even though puzzles are kind of a little bit difficult for first time GMs, but at least attempt some sort of puzzle like scene
you know,
or conflict.
and I can say this too, I can say this to everyone out there, in the interwebs. You guys are getting into this at a golden time. I mean, this is the best time to be getting into gaming ever because you do have resources. You have so many people who are into this stuff. You got celebrities, you've got YouTube channels and Twitch streams, and you can go to your local library. There's clubs, there's stores, all these places for you to go to get into this hobby and learn it and explore it. And for old guys like especially like me and Anthony, you know, we basically watched this thing evolve and we had to learn that it was okay to to broaden our horizons because we could have had tunnel vision, be like, you know what, I'm not playing anything but D&D. Nope, there's only D&D. you know but there was other stuff out there, and you know what, and we learned, I know I learned that, I don't have anything against crunch, but when it comes to running the game, some of it gets in the way from me. you know I learned that I like the sweet spot of Cypher System, Numenera, their games, because to me they have just enough mechanics so things don't go haywire, but it's open enough for me to tell the story I want to tell. But don't get me wrong, I still love D&D. I'm going to love D&D to the day I die. I'll play Pathfinder too. I'll play anything, but I'm running Cypher. you
um,
know
I was just gonna get us back on topic. With encounters, right? What's the importance of having non-encounter time? Because I would like to believe you can't have a series of encounters without having the players unwind for a minute in between encounters. And why would you do that as a new GM?
I
well,
mean, oh,
go ahead, Ann.
I mean,
Go ahead,
what
Ann.
I was gonna say was, as a new GM, the what you call it, it gives you a little breathing room too. So what Anthony is alluding to here is like from encounter to encounter, there's gonna be some narration involved. There's not really gonna be any dice rolling unless the characters try to interact with each other or something while their narration's going on. But then that becomes an encounter. But this is avoiding that. Like, let's say they're just talking or walking or whatever have you. So during those moments, they'll just be interacting with one another. They'll be developing their characters, their bonds with one another by this role playing, whether they'll be walking from point A to point B, winding down for the night in the tavern with a drink or whatever have you. But this time lets the players explore their characters, explore the other characters at the table, and while they're doing that, you can just think about what's ahead, the next encounter, where they're going to. And yeah, it's
And
really useful.
And I mean, I think Al summed it up great. It really does. It gives you and the players both time to think about what's next. You know, it's kind of like, just like, if you think about it, it's again that simulationist idea. In the real world, we have jobs, and then we leave our jobs and we come home and we have non-job time. It's a time to just relax, recoup, think about things. And that's what I think, that's what the non-encounter time or downtime means.
I think it allows the players to formulate their actions and think about what they're going to do next. And as a GM, it's a great tool for you to pace your adventure. Because you can't go 100 miles a minute, for 4 hours straight as a GM. So you allow the players to interact with themselves to give you time to better prep, like Al said, the rest of the adventure.
Yeah, and again, and as the GM, even if you already have your like whatever your next encounters or whatever planned, you already know the direction you're gonna take or whatever have you. These moments are also very enjoyable because you get to watch these people basically act, or they're portraying their characters at this moment, so you get to see exactly how they embody those characters and like their personality, and it's extremely. I mean, I love watching that sort of interaction between the characters, and again, it's something you get to enjoy as a GM, that not so much as a player. I mean, you do get to enjoy it as a player, but as a player, you're also part of it because you're discussing or whatever have you. You're thinking about your character at that time. You can't really look at it from the outside in and really enjoy the whole interaction.
Yeah, you don't look at it as a macrocosm when
Yes.
you're a player. It's a microcosm, because you're truly dealing with your character's motivations and your character's needs and desires and wants. But as a GM, you get to sit back and take it all in. And the nice thing about it is, a lot of times, what I think we've said it a thousand times, but pay attention to your players, because they're going to tell you things. They're going to tell you things that you don't even know they're telling you, and it's going to help you build your encounters. It's going to help you make better encounters. It's going to help you flesh them out, and like Anthony was saying, it's going to help you pace them.
I think you just said something that sparked something, in my head, when you was like, you take it all in. And I think in the downtime is when you have the best opportunity to take it all in.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they're not directly interacting with you as the GM and they're interacting with the other players, that's your moment to see what they really want, because they're going to tell you in character, or tell another character in character, what are their goals and aspirations as a player. And it's like exactly what you say. You sit there and take it all in, and that's a perfect time to jot down notes to give the players what they want.
Exactly, and it's like what I said. And you need to use that information to further fuel your encounters later, and it's just perfect.
When before we started recording this video, Dean came up with this fabulous idea of doing creating an encounter like on the fly. So your guys had a basic idea of what we would consider a decent encounter. So let's give that a shot.
All right, so
Okay.
yeah, what's the idea we're going with, fellas?
What genre we want to do it in? You know what? Let's do it in Numenera, since we were talking about
Okay.
Cypher. They're
Yep.
getting ready. So I would probably say that everybody, you see the sunrise over the hills, and as the sun rises over the hills, you're looking down from a vista, looking down on the Steadfast, and you see people milling around. You see that the marketplace is getting ready to start up, and you know what? You have to get to the market in order to make a trade with this particular merchant. Anthony, what else is going on?
All right. So as the characters, are having, they have to be a reason for them to want to find this merchant. And we're going to say that this is the only merchant that sells a certain kind of Numenera that they need to go further in this adventure. And we're going to say that this Numenera is Hmm. It's Numenera that allows a person to be invisible for a certain period of time.
All right. I mean, that's a pretty good setup, right? So the way
Mm.
I would approach this setup, and again, there's many different ways that you can set up the encounter. But me personally, I would set it up in such a way that the players, again, they know when the shop opens. They could find out when it closes later, to see if they want to sneak in, maybe steal it from him, or that's assuming he has a shop or it's not a booth or whatever have you. But essentially, I would set it up that the merchant would not know them. They would have to persuade him heavily to want to even sell it to them, because it's such a rare and valuable thing. He's never seen them before, and he only trusts people that he knows.
Yeah. We have to add the conflict. So I would say
So
that there's another party there at the same time the group arrives to purchase this Numenera or to steal it, trying to do the same exact thing.
and and that's what I'm saying. So here's the deal. As a game master, you know what? You can't prepare for everything, but you have to think. What kind of party am I dealing with? Are my guys martial? Are they the
Mm.
ones who like to pull their swords and kick doors in and intimidate people into giving it to me? Or do I have a group of smooth talkers? Are they going to come in and try to woo the guy and, like Alice said, persuade him or perhaps even deceive him into giving it? Or are they the sneaks? Are these the ones who want that puzzle? So there's an encounter, and we just gave you three different ways that it could be approached. And
And
then Anthony added, a
uh,
fourth thing with the other group who want something.
and just since we're riffing on this, you just gave me a list of 4 different types of groups. Just make sure that the other group is the polar opposite of what your core group is.
Exactly.
So if your core group is the martial type, make these guys the sneaky type, or
Or the smooth talkers. Yeah.
yeah, the smooth talkers. So to create an encounter within the encounter.
Right. And that's what we were saying before about once you get comfortable, you'll start seeing the dynamics of what you can do within, whatever parameters you have already set for yourself. Because, it started out just as we got to go meet a merchant, make a trade to get an item. And now it's like, oh, wait a minute. We got some other guys over here who do this. And wait a minute. And the merchant don't want to deal with us because he don't know us. You know,
Mm.
how do we deal with that? And that's the cool part about it. You as the GM get to have fun in that realm, and that's what it is. Think of it as fun. Don't think of it as a chore. You know, and
I, I just think it's wonderful because not only is it fun for you, but you're giving the players options. Because ultimately, that's what a GM does. A GM sets a story with options to allow the players to go in multiple directions. So we just set a scene that has 4 different options the players could choose to go. You know, and either way it's done, it's very minimal prep work for you. And the encounter could lead into another encounter, which once again is more options.
I forgot what I was gonna
Mm.
say. um,
well,
but yeah, I think that pretty much sums up encounters pretty well. And then
mhm.
the article goes on to talk about like what to read for going forward to have a little more understanding of the game mechanics, so you know how to
Mm.
resolve these encounters, because the encounters aren't just something interesting that's going on, they're also basically the gameplay. It's how the players are gonna roll their dice, use their abilities, so on and so forth. So in order for that to happen, you have to know how the mechanics work. And
Yes.
yeah, they break down what chapters and pages to read. What is it, like chapter 8, pages 116 to 117. It lists where to start, where to stop. Pages 119, 120, where to start, stop. All of this in chapter 8, and the last section they say to read is 122 to 128. And yeah, it just breaks down stuff like how to activate special abilities, what movement is like, how to start an action, how long an action takes, experience points, all those sort of things that makes up the gameplay.
And that's awesome advice for any pre-written adventure or any rule system in general. If you're running a pre-written adventure, you don't have to memorize all the rules, but you should be acquainted with the rules that are specifically being used in that adventure.
The basic mechanics of your game is what we're getting at. And the only other thing I would, the only other thing I would add to that is that, you know what, again, don't get bogged down by it. You know, Al named a bunch of pages to look at and read with sections and all that, but trust me, it's don't let it be overwhelming. You know,
The pages I was reading are the ones specifically designed for Take or Sorrow that use these abilities.
And I will piggyback off what Dean just said real fast before we continue with the rest of their advice. Me as a new GM, specifically with Cypher system, which is what I started with, what Numenera is based on. All my learning of the rules was orally from Anthony, and that's what I used to run a game. Like, I honestly didn't even read the book. Like, I don't even think I had the book at that point. But I had character sheets, and I had, I had to have the book because I made characters. But I didn't actually really read the rules too much because of, I had my confidence in my foundation, like we discussed in our other video. I had a good groundwork of, how to resolve conflicts or resolution of situations and encounters. So I wasn't getting bogged down and saying, hey, how do I resolve this specifically? I had confidence in my foundation, and that was able to keep the flow of the game going very smoothly. Yeah, and so that the article ends with a little more advice on what to read, and this is more setting for Taker of Sorrow. This is just to get your mindset into like what the setting of that particular story is like, and it tells you to read chapters 10, pages 136 to 141, and Navarine. And yeah, that would just be you getting in the headspace of what that environment is like, and reading this sort of stuff is also kind of crucial because it gives you an idea of like what are the conflicts happening in this setting, like what are the major factions, all the sort of stuff that would go into your encounters and your adventure. So it's kind of good to have even a vague idea, even if you don't memorize it or read it too thoroughly.
And I just want to say that we're being specifically vague on Take or Sorrow in any of our videos because our hope is that some of the new first-time GMs are actually running this, and we didn't want to spoil anything. But at the end of New GM month, if anyone is interested and want us to either run Take or Sorrow or do a video on that adventure, we could do that as well.
Yeah, most definitely.
And yeah, that sounds great, Anthony. That's a good idea. And the last thing I want to add to all of this, we've talked about the adventure, we've talked about encounters in general, we've talked about the basics. I think that's really the takeaway here. Learn the core mechanic, know the core mechanic of your game, whatever game you're playing. Also, take into account kind of who you are. Think about who you are in the real world. Are you a person who's detail oriented? Are you a person who's very much on the fly? All those type things. Bring those to the table too with you because those will help you flesh out what kind of GM you want to be. And finally, one other thing you can use as a helper for your learning experience and developing these type things. Think of your television shows. Think of things that you watch. Television shows really even more so than movies. Television shows have a tendency to do a lot of framing of a scene because they don't have the budget. They don't have the special effects and everything. So they rely much more on developing an encounter. I don't know. I mean, whatever show you watch, did you watch The Witcher? Watch how they always had him, how he interacted with people, and it wasn't always his sword wasn't always the first thing he drew. If you watch Star Trek, you watch, Captain Picard versus Captain Kirk, all those things come into play. You can have so much fun just by using what you have at your disposal.
Yeah, most definitely. And again, don't get bogged down on most of the mechanics, the setting stuff, like all that information. Like it's nice to have it, but if you're confident with not knowing all of it, it's awesome. Like, you don't have to know all of it. Like, just ask these guys. Ask them how much I know about the stuff I run. Pretty much nothing. But I have confidence in my foundation. I have confidence in the adventure and the story that I'm telling. So, really, what it boils down to is fun and confidence when you're a first-time GM.
And if you need help, it's great reading a new Game Master Month article on website, but you could also go to the new Game Master Month Facebook group and get great advice from experienced GMs, or join Cypher Unlimited Discord. We have tons of GMs that are happy to help play your games or give you advice if you need it.
Yeah, we actually have someone actively, saying that they'll help people out. A member named Burst of Hope. She's there, trying to get new GMs to ask questions. Like, if you have an issue with an encounter or trying to wrap your head around how to actually run it, they've offered up their services or their help, and us as well. Like, come join Cypher Unlimited. Yeah,
we're all here for you guys.
Again, so we've said in previous videos, we have a channel dedicated to new GMs, and a loving community who is always willing to help.
And a bunch of people have already stated that they're willing to play in new GM's games. Me personally,
all of us included.
Us personally, I can speak for the entire crew here. We definitely want to get in, because there's nothing like that. I'll be honest with you. I think new GMs bring a crazy enthusiasm, and also just sometimes the stuff that they come up with is stuff that you don't think about because you're kind of steeped in it already. So I really enjoy that, because So yeah, new GMs, come run us some games. Cypher Unlimited Discord.
And I think there's a.
I just want to say once again, thank you to Mighty Cook Games, Atlas Games, Pilgrim Press, and Chaosium Inc. for making new Game Master Month a possibility. You guys are all awesome. Yeah,
definitely. Be sure to check out their games. Even if you love Numenera, like, these guys are helping spread the word of New GM Month, and it's definitely an awesome thing, to support people who are trying to support people. Like, if they're trying to support us, it's awesome just to spread that around. But yeah, it's been an awesome talk. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. The usual. Hit that little bell button to get notifications to when we post videos. And any last final thoughts, fellas?
It's just good to all be back together again. I missed my Cypher brother.
Yeah, me too. Group hug, internet hug.
And we'll have all the relevant links posted down below to the articles we spoke about. And be sure to check out our next video next week, where we'll talk about the next two articles. From us,
share, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And go ahead.
From us at the CU, we will see you later.